Scientists treated the untreatable, economies decoupled from emissions, and a lost bird is returning to London. Plus more good news this week's Good News Roundup. Revolutionary therapy treats untreatable blood cancer. A world-first gene therapy, which turns white blood cells into a disease-busting living drug, has reversed previously untreatable blood cancers, scientists said this week. Great Ormond Street Hospital, Gosh, and King's College Hospital in London treated 9 children and 2 adults with T-cell leukemia using the technique, which scientists said triggered a deep remission in the majority. 7 are still disease-free 3 years later. Developed by Gosh and University College London UCL, the technique involves editing the genetic code of donor T cells to target cancer cells without attacking the patient's body. The research was funded by Blood Cancer UK. A few years ago this would have been science fiction, said UCL's Prof. Wasim Qasim. Now we can take white blood cells from a healthy donor and change a single letter of DNA code in those cells and give them back to patients to try to tackle this hard-to-treat leukemia. Back in 2022, 13-year-old Alyssa Tappy, pictured from Leicestershire, England, was the first in the world to receive the treatment, known as BCAR7. I've now been able to do some of the things I thought earlier in my life it would be impossible for me to do, said the now 16-year-old who's cancer-free. My ultimate goal is to become a research scientist and be part of the next big discoveries that can help people like me. Image Great Ormond Street Hospital. Economies and emissions are decoupling at scale since the Industrial Revolution. Economies and emissions have been inextricably linked, growing the former meant growing the latter. Not anymore, suggests a report published on Thursday. It found that countries responsible for nearly 2 of the global economy are decoupling emissions from growth, a trend that has accelerated since 2015, when the Paris Agreement was signed. The Energy Climate Intelligence Unit report noted that the most pronounced decouplings had taken place in Norway, pictured Switzerland and the UK, which grew their economies while shrinking their emissions. Many emerging economies, they added, have also achieved decoupling, including Brazil, Colombia, Egypt, Jordan and Mozambique, with China, the world's biggest polluter, not far behind. Was sometimes told the world can't cut emissions without cutting growth. The opposite is happening, said John Lang, a co-author of the report. Of course, global totals matter most and CO2 emissions continue to rise, though at a far slower rate than 10 years ago. But under the hood, the structural shift is unmistakable. More countries are bending their curves. Crucially, China's CO2 emissions have been flat for 18 months and may have peaked. Some experts argue that decoupling alone is not sufficient to reduce environmental pressures and call for a shift to economic models that respect planetary boundaries. Image JRNK's Oakland, Australia's social media ban for kids kicked in. All eyes are on Australia, where a ban on social media for under 16s came into force this week. Legislators around the world are grappling with the thorny issue of social media use among children, as well as potentially exposing them to harmful content and online predators. Social media has been linked to poor mental health among young people. This is Australia showing enough is enough, said Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese as the ban came in on Wednesday, prompting many young people to try and find ways around it. Critics of the new law argue that it infringes on young people's rights to communicate. Others see it as a necessary measure to save childhood from the digital ether and the commercial interests of big tech. Australia is not acting alone. A ban on social media for under 14s came into effect in the US state of Florida last week, with bipartisan support. Meanwhile, Denmark is pressing ahead with its own ban, announced last month. Image Lashon Dodd's Syrians march Human Rights Day for the first time in its history. Syria joined much of the rest of the world in marking Human Rights Day on Wednesday, a symbolic move that the United Nations described as a small but meaningful step. While the political and security situation in the country remains unpredictable, the UN expressed cautious optimism about the direction of travel a year after the fall of dictator Bashar al-Assad. It noted that the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, OCHA, which had been blocked from operating inside Syria for many years, now has a team permanently deployed in Damascus. The OCHA said that it marked a significant turning point after a long period of monitoring human rights conditions remotely from neighboring Lebanon. However, it acknowledged that challenges remain, among them rebuilding the war-damaged country and achieving justice for past and present violations. Image Solidarity scale of UK's Industrial Revolution revealed there are people who poo-pooed the idea of wind farms, claiming they could never be a serious player in the energy mix. A new report firmly put that idea to bed this week. Marking 25 years since the UK installed its first offshore turbine, it chronicled the country's progress over that time, saying it amounted to an industrial revolution. The UK launched its first offshore wind farm at Blyth Harbour, northeast England, on 7 December 2000. It was the largest in the world at the time, producing 4 NW of power. Fast forward 25 years and UK offshore wind now generates 16,000 NW, enough to power 16 N homes. The report was published by the think tank Ember, which said that the UK's offshore wind sector employs around 40,000 people. The rapid rollout of offshore wind to added helped the UK quick coal last year. Renewables produce around 60% of the UK's electricity, up from just 3% in the year 2000. Last Friday, the country smashed its wind power record, producing enough wind to power 23 M homes. It really shows what's possible when we back clean homegrown